Hi, everybody. This is Jared, and I just want to give you a little bit of insight in what I hope is a short video to guide you and instruct you a little bit in the compilation and the composition of your work sample presentations. So at this point, you have all begun the student teaching experience. Hopefully, you're feeling a little bit more at ease as you get to know student names and the lay of the school a little bit and maybe the routines of the day. And so it's important as you begin to intentionally start planning and designing instruction that you're going to lead to be thinking a little bit about this work sample presentation that is due at the end of your student teaching residency, because it takes some time. And sometimes your interventions are going to require that you gather some data and that you try different activities and different learning types of experiences throughout an extended period of time. And so this is not the sort of thing you want to leave until the end of the semester. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rubric for this. And I've found this on page 22 and 23 of the semester residency student teacher residency notebook that you should have received during one of those initial meetings with Brooke Murphy. And so as we take a look at this, the criteria are listed over here on the left, and I'm just going to work with the 5 score because that's the goal, right? That we would achieve as many points as possible in each area. And so I'm going to share this rubric with you, and I'm going to refer back to it, but then I'm also going to show you a student example, and we can determine whether or not the student necessarily met all of these objectives. But the first one is more focused upon the special needs of students. And so evidence is given throughout your work sample that you have planned supports that are aligned to the learning goals and provide opportunities for students with different learning needs. You also make note of any IEP or 504 plans according to students that you have within the classroom. So if the student that you are creating a work sample over has a particular learning plan, whether that's an IEP or a 504, you certainly want to make note of that. And then you're also intentionally giving us all the information we need to know that you have planned and taken those students' needs into account as you've gone about your instruction, your assessment, and your intervention. The second one has to do with your assessments, and it says that they provide evidence through multiple modalities and are strategically designed to allow individuals or groups with specific needs to demonstrate learning. What's most important here, in my opinion, is this multiple modalities. And so what that means is, although you have 3 different work samples, they shouldn't all be the exact same assignment. They shouldn't all be the exact same 5-question quiz or same essay question, but you should be assessing student ability and knowledge in different ways, in multiple modalities. And then also that you are consistently monitoring student work. The next criteria deals with the evidence that you're using, that you are using both quantitative and qualitative evidence to demonstrate patterns of learning for the focused student and the whole class. For these purposes, quantitative is any sort of number, that X number of students were below expectations, and X number met expectations, and then X number of students were above expectations. Anytime you use percentages, those would be quantitative forms of evidence. Qualitative would be more of the observations that you're recording. This student really seemed to perform well or be engaged when they were working with a small group. Okay, or any sorts of quotes that you gather from students. Those would be examples of qualitative evidence. For the next criteria, the use of research to support your findings and your intervention, the fundamental principles of one theorist who specializes in the area concerning the intervention are explained. After explaining the theory, the candidate makes at least 3 direct connections between the theoretical principles and the intervention. So, in other words, you have to base your interventions, what you're doing in the classroom, upon theory, upon research. And in order to do that, you need to bring one or more theorists into this work sample presentation. Okay, and so you're looking for a theorist that has to do with whatever your focus is. And when you create these learning experiences, these interventions, you need to directly tie that to the theorist that you're bringing in. So you need to explain to us and justify, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing with my students, because according to this research, according to this theorist, this is something that's going to help improve my students' learning throughout the course of the unit or the lesson or whatever it is. And then finally, using assessment to drive instruction. You are providing next steps, which give us general support for the group, that's the entire class, and specific support for the focus student to improve their learning related to both the content, the content being analyzed and active learning. So you're giving us a slide in which you're presenting your next steps. What would you do next if you were still working in this classroom? And then on the following page, you see that this is really more of a checklist. And the expectation is that you would be doing all of these things so that we would be able to mark yes for every single one. Do you have a SMART goal? Is it specific, measurable, attainable? Do you evaluate 3 work samples? Do you date the work samples? Do you reflect on other presentations that are being given on your same day that you're presenting? Do you present information in a PowerPoint or a Google slide format? Do you include all 3 work samples in your presentation? And do you turn in an evidence binder with all of these things? And so really, the way that this work sample is structured is that you are going to have 3 different assessments, 3 different snapshots of your entire class, and then also your one specific focus student and how they performed on this assessment. And so those are the 3 work samples. Those are the 3 different tests or measures to see that your student is growing to achieve or to master whatever your goal is. And in between each of those work samples, you are going to create an intervention strategy. So you present your first work sample and you tell us the results of that. And your student is probably below achievement level. And then you need to explain what your intervention is. What are you going to do with the whole class, and how are you going to target your particular student in order that they might grow for the second work sample or the second assessment? And even if they grow, they might not still be at that point we want them to be to meet our goal. So then after that second work sample, you're going to give us a second intervention, a second targeted mode of instruction, some sort of activity, some sort of learning exercise that is going to, again, allow your student and the entire class to move forward to reach their learning goal. And then the hope is that by the time you get to that third work sample, that's your final assessment, and that you have seen growth throughout the entire class, but you've also seen growth or demonstrated growth for your particular student you're focusing on. Okay, so that's the hope here. Let me pull up this PowerPoint presentation, and you'll have to forgive me a little bit because it's a science example. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily have an English language arts example. You could certainly send me one when you're done so that I have it for the future, but this is the only one that I have. And so hopefully you're able to see the actual presentation screen and not like my second screen here. But I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this because it is science, but I just wanted to share this with you because this is an actual authentic student example of what a work sample looks like. Okay, so here's their cover or their title of their, let me see, how do I move forward with this here? Okay. First slide of the presentation, it details the demographic information of their school. This is important. You are using this and accumulating this for tab 1 in your binder, in your residency binder, your notebook. And so you just want to give us that information so that we have some sense of your school. You're never going to refer to your student by name or your school by name. Some people in the audience, myself included, we might know where you're student teaching or where you're drawing your information from, but you don't want to directly state that. Some people who are assessing your work sample presentation, they might have no idea where your student taught. So this just gives them a little bit of a background before moving into your work sample. So here they're detailing the makeup of their classroom. It looks like it's a high school class. It's predominantly sophomores and juniors. They tell us that they have a couple of students on 504 plans, one student who's on an IEP. They explain that this is what the 504 plan looks like for this particular student, and this is what they're doing. So this meets that first standard on the rubric. They're explaining and documenting what it is that they're doing, how they're supporting that student, and how they're aligning their support with the student's learning goals. Here's a second student for 504 plan, and then here's a third student on an IEP. And again, they are simply providing evidence that their planning supports and that they're addressing all of the required elements on the 504 and the IEP. Here's their first introduction of their theorists, and so they're going to use McNeil and Krajcik, and so they give us quotations from a text that they pulled this from. This could potentially be a theorist that you have from a class that you've been in at USF. This could be something that your school district is using that's based upon research. And here is the framework that they're asking students to use for their goal that we'll get to here in just a second. Remember, this is science reasoning. And here's where they give us the example or work sample number 1. And we can see here that most students in the class are below expectations. None have achieved mastery. They're giving us information about the entire class, but then they're also going to give us their targeted students example. They're dating this example, and then they're noting in the next slide some of the strengths and some of the areas in need of improvement for that student. Here's where they actually give us the goal. Okay, this is what they want to do, or this is what they want to see throughout their class. And then secondly, this is what they want their focus student to achieve or to meet by the end of this work sample. So they go on to explain their intervention strategy between their first and second work sample. So this is called intervention number 1, and these are the types of things that they're going to try to do, and this is the way that they connect that to their theorist, who's supposed to back up with evidence what their intervention strategy or method would look like. Here is work sample number 2. We can see that as far as the whole class is concerned, they have made improvement. A few students have moved to mastery, several more have moved to meet expectations, but we still have 5 who are below expectations, including the student that they're focusing on. Okay, this student is still below expectations at this point. So then it becomes time for intervention number 2. Remember, intervention number 2 will come between work sample number 2 and work sample number 3. So here is your opportunity to detail what you're going to do as part of your intervention and how your theorist supports this intervention. Here they give us a rubric. And they explain how they're going to use that. You can't see the whole thing, but you get the idea there. And then they give us their final work sample. And this is the whole class information. So we can see, while we still have 2 students who are below expectations, everybody else in the class has met expectations. Here's the third work sample of the focus student, and they let us know at this point that this student has moved up from below expectations, not just to meet expectations, but to master what they're supposed to do. And so they bring up that goal again. They tell us that they have met their goal, and then they give us the next steps that they would use if they were to continue working with these students in the future. Again, they're tying it to their theorist so that they're giving evidence for everything that it is they're trying to do. This is a slide that details how this work sample might impact their future instruction, or how this assessment might drive their future instruction. And then at the end, they have an opportunity for people to ask questions, and they give the reference slide as well. So I hope this helps a little bit in sort of clarifying the expectations for your upcoming work sample.